The latest season of Living Alone in the Wild begins. You have no idea how hard it is to build a shelter, let alone build a shelter in the sky. Wilderness Alone returns to the season champion. Challenge: build a shelter in the sky in 3 days. Number 1 contestant Jordan. He was the 6th season champion, famous for hunting a deer with 1 arrow. The second player, Chris. He was the winner of the 8th season, hunting a deer with an arrow and eating barbecue every day. The third contestant, Joel. He was a contestant in season 7 who survived 40 days. Eat barbecue every day with a good hunt. This time the referee is Amos. He was the 7th player to stay 58 days. Has caught the most fish this season. Each contestant will be given a box at the start. They need to use the tools in the box. Build a shelter in the sky. The shelter requirement is 3 meters in the air. There is also a storage area for food. Opening day, they were placed in different environments, but there are more trees, perfectly adequate for their use. Joel began to explore the surroundings. Find a suitable location for the shelter. The 3 trees in front of you can build a shelter, just enough to form a platform with a standing position. We can build a bridge in the middle. Once the plan is settled, the wood is cut. Wilderness Alone, jungle, no air shelter. Only the control shelf ever appeared. 3 days to build a shelter. Time is very tight, and building shelters is a physical job. Joel uses a branch structure. Lift the 2 trees up cleverly. This is just a shelter rock bridge. Hold the wood in place with rope. The stability of the bridge is very good. Bearing someone is not a problem. The next step is to perfect the structure of the ladder. The ladder facilitates him to carry the wood up. Soon an aerial ladder was made. The difficult part of air shelter is conception. How do you get the wood to the tree? Jordan put a frame directly under the trees. Framework as the first platform. Shelter requirements: 3 meters high shelter. So he has to go up and build a platform. Got to say, the big guy is the big guy. Jordan has the easiest way to set up a shelter in the sky. Looking forward to making a beautiful shelter. Chris chose the shelter between these 3 big trees. But there's a lot of space around here. There is also more space between large trees. How was he supposed to build the shelter on top of it? After planning the plan, Chris began to collect wood. Unfortunately, on the job, the saw broke. It's going to affect his wood collection. Collecting wood is a physical job. Moving wood is also a waste of time. Chris over here. The broken saw greatly affected his work. He collected all the wood. The first step is to build a ladder. Cress peeled the wood. Is that so much to ask? Just building a shelter. It's not like building a palace. The sky began to thunder. Cleese was forced to stop working. Time to the next day. Joel started building the shelter's platform today. First, make sure the tree supports are secure. His way up the tree was more or less dangerous. Just make sure you get these beams right. It's the support frame for the whole shelter. The beams are tied, but that's not enough. Joel also put a tree at the bottom of the beam, used to hold the beam against bending. The next step is to lay the floor. After laying the floor, then tie each piece of wood with wire. So we're done with the bottom split. He also plans the location of beds and lockers. Jordan built a ladder over here, mainly to make it easier for him to climb up. It's not a big spot up there. You have to build a bed and a storage shelf in such a small space. He had to figure out how to get the wood up there. Jordan goes straight in little by little. Let's start with the storage racks. It's very simple. Just build a wooden frame, and then you plug the moss into the crevices so it can be used to store food. Then build a lid out of wood. It's easy to make, but more wood is used. Jordan also made a small switch for fear that the air inside will be eaten. But this nightstand is kind of nice. He fell while he was watching. Joel is still collecting wood. Chris just built the ladder. Jordan was making fun of Amos. Why make the shelter so high? All the players are building fast. Joel finally builds the ladder. Then he began to build a floor frame. Should we just lift the frame up? Didn't finish watching this moment. I can't believe he built a platform like this. He uses the bark he stripped off. What's even more surprising to me, he roofed this shelter very cleverly. The wooden frame is used to create a perfect roof structure. The stick looks a lot more luxurious when it's peeled. I'd rather live in a shelter like this for 10 years. Time came to the 3rd day. Jordan started building the roof of the shelter today. He's also going to use the tarp, but he wants to build a shelter with a slope, bind wood between trees, and then a row of sticks for support. Just cover it with a tarp. This half trapezoidal shelter is very beautiful. I'm not afraid to get out when I go to sleep at night. Next up is Joel's sanctuary. He's going to build a storage shelf for the shelter. Nothing new about wood. He wants to build it out of a harder rock. Use stones to build storage shelves. That would certainly add weight to the shelter. Cress made storage shelves out of tree bark. I thought he was making Louis Vuitton backpacks. Jordan was collecting moss nearby. The storage rack has been done for him. him. You don't even need moss. Is it a mattress? Joel built a simulation of a stone storage shelf. That's a lot of weight. Cleese's storage shelf is a bark bag. I can put things, though, but there's not much to put in. It might be hard to pack a smoked fish. Joel dug up a lot of dirt. He built a fire platform with stones and mud, so you can build a fire up there at night without getting burned. Earth and stone insulate. It still looks pretty good. The next step is to build beds for the shelter. Wood is the only choice. Jordan made a mattress out of moss, and it's so beautifully laid. Joel is a different story. He cut off a tarp, make a bed, made a hammock right out of the shelter. Cress built a bed of sticks. It's censorship day. Amos will weigh in on their shelter. The requirement is to be able to stay up there for one night, and a storage shelf. So can they complete the challenges required? The first is Joel's shelter. You have to cross this bridge every time you get to the shelter. He uses wood on which he can make a fire. It can also boil water and cook food. Except he set the storage shelf on the ground. Shouldn't it be at the shelter? There's a stake in the shelf. He's gonna sleep on it tonight. Aren't you afraid to roll down at night and die? The second is Jordan's shelter in the sky. The bottom of Jordan's shelter was polished to keep the bees from climbing up. He cooks food at the shelter. Looking at the mushroom meal is very tempting. A shelter like this should be nice. It's just not easy to get up and down. A nightstand is a storage shelf, and Cleese's shelter is probably the most elaborate. You can also start a fire on it. Cress is making roasted rats today. The taste is delicious. Just sleep on it at night. I got up early this morning. It was still raining lightly, but it doesn't affect the inside of the shelter. The rat in the storage shelf is still there. Bake it hot for breakfast. Cleese is very pleased with the shelter. Jordan slept well last night, too. There's no need to worry about animal attacks at night. It can protect against rain and animals. It's very comfortable to live there. The food is still in the storage rack. Prove that this is safe and effective. Jordan's shelter is generally nice. Joel's still alive. Thought he's gonna roll off. The food in the storage shelf is still there. Also effective, but the shelter as a whole is not so pretty. All three shelters are good. Each shelter is very beautiful, and it's comfortable. Jordan's shelter has the safest structure at the bottom. His shelter all uses wood as a pillar. Can stay for a very long time. The wooden beds and nightstands on the shelter are very beautiful. And there's a combination lock. Joel's shelter makes full use of local materials, but the shelter does it more simply. The most luxurious shelter is Cress's. So which contestant sanctuary is finally here? It's going to get a good review from Amos. It's Jordan's sanctuary. Jordan's shelter made a beautiful nightstand and a bed. The roof of his shelter is perfectly wrapped, although Carl's shelter is exquisite. But the nightstand and the roof wrap are almost. And Joel's shelter is still habitable, but the risk of being killed by a fall is greater. If it were me, I'd rather stay at the shelter in Cress, because it's so good. If it's your choice, which shelter would you choose? Welcome to comment.